Let's get started with some great front-end questions today. Now, today we are going to focus on the to-do list. And I'm guessing that most of you have used the to-do list at some point in your life. Maybe you have one on your phone or your computer, or if you're like me, you write it down. But we're going to try to implement that same functionality in a React application. So let's get started. Let's take a look at our preview. Essentially, our main goal today is to add any task that we want. Let's say that I want to make a YouTube video. Well, you can go ahead and do that and click submit. And if we want to delete that task, well, we can go ahead and do that too. And if we want to delete all of the other tasks, you should be able to do that. But whenever you refresh, you should have these default values. And that's basically what we're going to be doing. The other thing to keep in mind is that we are going to focus on functionality and not so much on styling or any of the CSS. We might have to make some changes here and there, but the main focus is on functionality. One of the first questions that may arise when we are trying to implement this component is, well, how am I going to store all this data? How am I going to structure it? In order to answer that, we first have to look at our component, right? And we notice here, at least, that we have some text. We also have a delete button. Now, my first thought is, okay, well, we need to store this text somewhere. Maybe it could go in an array, but then we also have the delete button. And as some of you probably know, when you need to delete it, usually when you delete an item from a list, you need some form of identification for that item in order to retrieve it and delete it. So in that case, I would say that we probably need to store two different fields. And what I think about initially is maybe having a label and an ID. And that can all go into an object. Our object is going to look something like this, where we have an ID, which can be of type number, a label, which can be of type string. And of course, from our example, we had multiple objects. So we'll probably have more copies of this. Hopefully I can copy this. Okay, there we go. And how should we store all of these objects is the other question. Well, we'll probably have to return some HTML. And when we're returning that HTML, we'll need to access the label and the string and the ID, I mean. So I would say the easiest way would be by mapping through those objects, and you can do that with an array. So let's use an array for our structure. So this is our basic structure, and let's go ahead and try to implement this in our application. All right, so let's go to our app.js, and I can already tell that we have some hard-coded values in here. We have the walk the dog, the water the plants. So what we can do is we can make an array that will store all that information in the structure that we were talking about before. So let's make a constant array with, we'll call it default tasks. And it's going to be an array with different objects. Each object is going to have a label. Let's go ahead and copy our label, and we'll probably need an ID too. In this case, we're going to call an ID. We'll start at 0, and our ID will increment each time. Actually, you know what? We'll name it I. And let's go ahead and copy this 3 different times. And we're probably going to need a way to store the default tasks in some form of state. So let's go ahead and import our useState hook from React. And the useState hook allows us to store the state and also update the state whenever we need to. So here we go, and we will call our array or task, let's call it tasks. and we are going to set our tasks. And initially it will equal our default tasks. Have our tasks, we can go ahead and map through all of them and display the new list item. So how you would do that by getting your tasks and mapping through them, and then getting each of the tasks within the task, and then we are going to want to return that task with its proper list. And in this case, let's actually destructure our task, which has our label and an ID. And in that case, it's easier to access the label. And of course, if we don't include a key, we're going to get errors. So let's make the key the ID. So that's the first part. Now we can see that everything is displaying. We just didn't update all the labels to the correct labels. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now everything should look good. Let's refresh it. Yes, everything's fine now. And let's go ahead and delete these list items. In order to delete a task, we are going to need to use the onClick handler. So whenever we click the button, we should execute a function. And when that function is executed, well, we want to update our task array. And in order to do that, we could just do it all within this button, but let's actually go ahead and let's make the onClick. But we'll just pass a function to the onClick handler. And here, we're going to be removing the task, and we're going to need to pass this ID to the function. So let's put that in here. And in order to remove the task, we need to filter the original array. And we could do that by, let's make a new variable called filtered, which will take the tasks. I can't spell today. Take the tasks and filter the tasks. And each task, we are going to check if the ID of that task is not equal to the current ID. And if that's the case, then we are excluding the task we do not want in our array. So let's set the tasks to our new filtered array. And this should go ahead and work, but let's call the function within the onClick handler and remove the task and send the ID. And let's give that a try. So that looked like it worked. We have our default values. Let's give it another try. Yes, so everything seems to work. Like, we can remove the tasks, but now we need to figure out how are we going to add a new task to our list. In order to do that, of course, we'll need to keep track of any changes that we have in our input. And we can actually store that in a state variable. So let's say we have constant n. Let's just name it value for now and set the val whenever we need to, and use state. Initially, our state will just be an empty string. And of course, our input also has a value that we need to update. And our value in this case will be our val. And whenever there are any changes on the input, we want to update this state, the state of the val. And to do that, we can use the onChange handler. And in this case, we will just set val to our event target value. Right, now let's go ahead and give that a try. How can we go ahead and test that? Well, we can test it by just console.logging it. And whenever we make a change, it should output. Yep. So that seems to work. Now the next part is we need to update our state whenever we add the task. So let's go ahead and use the onClick handler just like we did for deleting a task. And in this case, are we going to have a lot that goes within this onClick handler, or can we just do it within here? Well, we'll probably need to get the current state of, okay, we'll just make a function for it. So here, let's make a function where we can add the task. And we don't need to pass any parameters because we already have access to our value. And in this case, what we need to do is we need to set our task to the previous values of the task. And before we actually add anything in, let's make another variable that will have our result, which will be a label that has the value and an ID that increments. Since we have one, since we have this here, we're just going to increment it. And this should work. Now let's see. So it gets all the previous values, and now we have a new item that we want to add to our array. And let's see whether that works. So let's call it okay, so it says make a YouTube video. There we go. We can delete it. And it seems like we got all of the functionality so far. So it seems like we have all of the functionality. Now let's go ahead and check. Well, here, right, whenever we go ahead and input something, well, it should, let's give it a try. Make a YouTube video. When we delete it, notice that this does not get updated. So that what that tells me is that when we're removing, we are not setting our value to an empty string. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's do it again. It still does not get, our value does not change. And of course I had a typo here. Let's give it another try now. Make a YouTube video. And this time notice how it doesn't have anything in our input. So that looks fine. The other thing we should consider whenever we're building any components is whether it's accessible to everyone. So there are people that are going to be reading from your website, or they have screen readers, and in that case we'll probably need an ARIA label, which tells the reader what is going on. And in this case, right, adding a new task. And for the most part, that looks like everything that we need to do.